Hello and welcome to Breaking Bread with Rivaaj Maharaj, where nothing is off the table. For today's episode, I wanted to talk on the rhetoric coming out of Europe regarding Russia's hybrid war against Europe and its allies. So without further ado, let's get into it. I've come across an article online that I'm going to read snippets from to you. The title reads, "No front line, no pause, Russia's hybrid pressure on the Bundeswehr in Lithuania." Now, essentially what this is about, it's about the Russians waging a hybrid war against Europe. So not a conventional war, but one in cyberspace, one in terms of surveillance, spying, espionage, that type of thing. Covert operations, undermining Europe from within. Very clandestine operations. So let's have a look at what some of this article says. Russian forces are pushing into EU and NATO territory through hybrid warfare tactics, including surveillance, airspace violations, and psychological operations, and increasingly in the digital realm. So they're asserting that the Russians are now not only being bold and militant about their desires to want to control and conquer Europe, as in the case of military action in Ukraine, but also that the Russians are actively being involved in undermining Europe's security within the digital realm, psychological warfare, those types of things. Now the article goes on further. That is what a German soldier deployed in Lithuania experienced when he answered his phone and heard his own voice, a chat he'd had just hours earlier by an unknown caller. A comrade phones home, speaks for half an hour, and then gets a call from an unknown number. He answers and hears his own conversation from earlier, recorded and played back. Joshua Krebs described the experience in his book Inside Bundeswehr. Now, for me, the telling part of this entire article is this last bit. Because whilst it does go on to say that, the Russians are snooping, they're recording conversations and then playing it back, so it's also a form of psychological warfare and intimidation against the Bundeswehr in Lithuania. They then slip in that this gentleman, Joshua Krebs, described this incident in his book. And, that got warning bells ringing in my head immediately. Because nobody writes a book for fun. Nobody writes a book because it's out of philanthropy. He's obviously written this book with the intention of making sales. To make sales, sensationalism sells a lot better than the good old-fashioned truth. Because everybody loves a spicy story. So, I'm not saying that he's fabricating this. It is probably 100% true that this incident happened. However, it's being highlighted in his book. So you want to take that with a bit of skepticism as well, because there is some sort of financial gain that could be attributed to this claim. Now, let's look at the claims made in this article. The Russians are not only involved in military action, but they're affecting NATO and the EU and its allies through hybrid warfare tactics, including surveillance. Now, show me one country on the planet with surveillance capabilities or not that is not surveilling some other country. You see it all the time between adversaries, but you also see it between friends. Friendly nations are continuously surveilling each other. So, this type of rhetoric coming out at this point in time is something that makes you sit back and think, hang on, why are you telling me this now? Why is it being sensationalized? And, if you go in and swallow everything that they spit at you, it, you just become a stooge to the narrative, because you lose the ability for critical thinking and analysis and asking exactly why now and why this. Let's look further. They talk about the Russians interfering in airspace violations. When we shut down the airspace over Libya, was that not an airspace violation? Everybody knew who Gaddafi was, everybody knew what he did, but we choose a moment that's opportune to us to then enforce an airspace embargo over Libya? Psychological operations. Which country in the world hasn't been responsible for psychological operations? The Nazis during the Second World War dropped leaflets all throughout Europe talking of how the Nazis, according to astrology, would win the war. And then the Europeans and Americans climbed on the same bandwagon, then changed a lot of things and put out leaflet drops saying the exact opposite. So we're all involved in it. When we accuse a nation of espionage, and it's not like it's something that we ourselves are not engaged in. If that were the case, we wouldn't have MI5, MI6, the CIA, Mossad, the ISI. We wouldn't have all these intelligence agencies. So while we are pointing out that the Russians are engaged in this, and I'm not here to bang and beat the drums for the Russians, nor am I here to do it for anybody else. I'm just saying that when you get an article like this, reading it and then going and spouting it verbatim to everybody else that you meet because it's being said to you, then it must be the gospel. I think take a step back, sit back, listen, analyze the article, read between the lines, understand that what is being said in this article may be 100% true, but not only is it 100% true of the Russians, it's 100% true of us and probably almost every other nation on the planet. Because this is what nation states do. They surveil each other, friend and foe alike. It goes on to say drones have been used allegedly spy on sensitive defense systems such as Arrow 3 air defense system, as well as on exercises involving Germany's battle tank brigade 45 in Lithuania. So again, the use of the word allegedly. So this article is coming from a place where it cannot pinpoint facts accurately. So it leads us to assuming. And what does assuming do? Makes an ass out of you and me. However, let's look at, spy surveillance photos and the like. The Cuban Missile Crisis is an excellent case in point. The Americans flew over Cuba, picked up using their spy planes that the Russians had been amassing nuclear-capable missiles on Cuban soil. Now, had they not engaged in that form of espionage, they would not have known. But once again, what I'm saying is, we overlook that when we talk of the Cuban Missile Crisis because that's just a footnote at the bottom of the page. But when the Russians do it, it's it's the heading, it's the body, it's the conclusion, and everything in between. Again, we also engage in the same type of behavior. Every nation state does it. So it's nothing new. Absolutely nothing new. So the next time you come across articles like this, have a read through them. They're probably entertaining for what they are. But also understand that whilst there may be an element of truth in it, there is a lot that is left unsaid that we are unaware about. And once again, we have no idea what our own governments are doing in our name. I want to thank you for spending time with us, and we look forward to seeing you in the next episode. So please like, share, and subscribe, as it helps us with the algorithm and it helps our channel to grow.